Chuck E. Chan.
Here comes Chuck E. Chan.
Martial arts expert of reptile land.
This is the top 5 most iconic Canadian characters. These are some honorable mentions that didn't quite make the list. Terrence and Phillip, although being loud and proud Canadians, are really only in the early seasons of South Park as tertiary characters at best. So just not nearly important enough or having a long enough run to make the list. Bob and Doug also have the same issue. They weren't around long enough to have that much of an impact. And in fact, I've never heard a single person younger than myself ever mention them ever, which is a major problem if you want to be in the top 5 most iconic Canadian fictional characters. So, we have the Red Green Show, which I have heard people younger than myself mention, but that show, although it ran for 15 seasons, ultimately never truly was a hit. It was more so a show that was solid. If nothing else was on, you could pop it on, and there's some enjoyable episodes. I haven't watched all that many, but it was close to making the list. 15 seasons is an impressive stint for a show. But number 5 is Scott Pilgrim. Now, this realistically was only mainstream popular around the time that the movie came out, but it does have fans that persist. This is something that is still relevant to certain people long after the fact. The story is set in Toronto. There's lots of Canadian references. I think it solidly deserves its place in number 5. Number 4 is Deadpool. This character is an incredibly popular superhero slash supervillain who has a trilogy of films that not only were hits, but were incredibly well received. These are some of the best superhero films ever made. On top of that, he has a very successful comic book and is just absolutely loved anywhere he pops up. A cartoon, a Spider-Man cartoon. You have Deadpool pop up. People absolutely love it. And this character had a very loyal and dedicated fan base before those movies with Ryan Reynolds ever even happened. If you went to a comic book convention prior to 2016, you would see a surprising amount of Deadpool cosplays because this character was absolutely loved. His fourth wall breaking really just flipped the genre on its head. He's just absolutely awesome. To this day, you will see cosplays. He's got to be one of the most cosplayed characters ever, up there with the likes of Spider-Man, Batman, the Joker, Harley Quinn, Misty from Pokemon, Naruto, Goku. Deadpool has his place, not only in nerd culture, but pop culture as well. And he happens to be Canadian. Number 3 is much more Canadian, and that is Ricky from the Trailer Park Boys. Although the main 3 characters are absolutely iconic and quotable, the Swayze Express, the Green Bastard, you want one, that Bubbles says, these characters are all iconic, but Ricky oftentimes takes the place as the main character and definitely has the most catchphrases that have an impact in not only Canadian culture, but also American culture. I've encountered many Americans who are fans of this franchise, of this show, and some of them quote this show. Definitely Canadians en masse, particularly men, quote this show, quote this character Ricky all the time, to the point we have an entire genre of memes that are just called Rickyisms, because the character Ricky says things that are a little bit incorrect.
That's how you pronounce it?
I know how to pronounce it. I ordered fucking jalapeno. What in the fuck? Are you dressed up like a bumblebee for? And what are you like Indianapolis Jones?
He says water under the fridge, or Totiso. If you are around Canadian men on a regular basis, like if you work in a male-dominated field in Canada, you will hear a Rickyism at minimum once a week, every week of your life. From the point that this show aired to now, and who knows how long in the future. This show is wildly popular. definitely wildly popular in Canada and has an impact on the wider culture. Certain things in the show, when you watch it, you question whether or not they came up with the phrase or it's just a phrase that was taken from the Canadian zeitgeist. Like apparently Cobra Chicken, which refers to a goose, didn't originate from Trailer Park Boys. Apparently there was a viral video prior to that. But there's just countless of these catchphrases. Like it's not rocket appliances, mustard tie. The show is absolutely awesome. It's hilarious and it's endlessly quotable, which has a huge impact on Canadian culture. And the fact that this show ran for around 10 seasons, then it became animated, and there's all sorts of movies, additional other shows. The Trailer Park Boys, Ricky in particular, is one of the most iconic Canadian characters without questions. Hold on to your hats because I think there is two characters that are clearly more iconic when it comes to Canadian fiction. We'll just get right to it. It's Snake from Degrassi. This character appears in roughly 450 episodes, especially if you include the Degrassi movies and TV specials. Around 450 episodes of this franchise, spanning 3 decades. That is insane. Now there's a lot of people out there who aren't necessarily fans of Degrassi or haven't really watched it, but there's also a tremendous amount of people who have. I've met many Americans who are fans of Degrassi, who have watched the entire franchise. It is super distinctly Canadian, especially in the early seasons with Degrassi Junior High and Degrassi High. So Snake here was pretty much from the start. I don't think he was in the first, or maybe he was in the first season. But anyway, very early on, at the start of the franchise, and then throughout the entire franchise, because once Degrassi The Next Generation starts, he's the principal and the father of the character Emma. And what kind of sparked me to make this video was seeing a tier list that somebody had posted on social media, on one of those groups where there's all kinds of people commenting on it. And I believe it was like a Degrassi fan group or whatever. You know how your feed just feeds you random stuff? This was in there, and it was a tier list, and it had Snake at the very top tier, in his own tier of legend. And I read through the comments because I've talked before about how enormous this character is in the terms of Canadian entertainment and storytelling, because he's in decades, nearly 30 years of this show. That's insane. So I'm somebody who, when I met this actor at a convention, I was like, oh my god, I was kind of like starstruck in a way, because that's insane. That's just absolutely nuts. It's a bonkers. And for a character to just endure that long and to be that loved. So in the comments of this post that had him at the top in his own tier, there was not one person commenting questioning that. Now some people said, all right, maybe you could have Spike up there with him in the top tier, but him being in that top tier was not even remotely a possibility of removing him from that tier or him not being in that tier. Not one mention in the comments of him not being in that tier. Now granted, that's just of Degrassi characters, but still, to be in a work of fiction for 30 years, and most of that run being the kind of like dorky, cringy principal of the school, is impressive. Just the character is so absurdly long running. He's kind of unquestionable that he would be on a list of the most iconic Canadian characters, because who else can say that? Who else comes even close to that, right? You could say, all right, in the Red Green show, that dude's Red is like the main character, and that ran for 15 seasons, but I don't think That show never was anywhere as close as popular as Degrassi. Now Degrassi is geared towards a younger audience. It's geared towards kids. Why would that be a problem? It's not a problem when it comes to cartoons or anime. Why is it a problem when it's live action in a dramatic kind of goofy series? I don't see that as an issue or something to hold it back. I don't think that's valid at all. Who is more iconic? When you think about it, we had Deadpool on the list. So who goes hand in hand with Deadpool? Of course it's Wolverine. If you were to make a list of the most iconic superheroes, this would be that list in order. Number 1, Spider-Man. He's just the most popular. Number 2, Batman. He's the second most popular. But number 3 on that list would very clearly be Wolverine. And then 4 would be Superman. Wolverine, although most of the X-Men stories take place in America, although he does move to America, and the core story being about the prejudice against the mutants, and that being kind of a more American story, most of the X-Men stories are seen or presented through the lens of the character Wolverine, who is a Canadian and oftentimes leaves the group of the X-Men to go be a recluse in Canada. And his character does have interactions with like other Canadian characters. He joins basically a Canadian version of the group X-Men. He joins Alpha Flight. He does all kinds of Canadian things. He's not the most Canadian character, but he is the most iconic Canadian character. And I think he is one of the most impactful, one of the most iconic and important superheroes of all time. And I'll kind of explain why. So first of all, in live action superhero film history, nobody has played a character more than Hugh Jackman has played Wolverine. Now, that matters because that goes into the iconicness of this character, which I genuinely underestimated until the movie Logan came out and people started seeing it, and it was this hit that was super well received. I have always loved this character since I was a child watching the animated series in the 90s. So when the movie Logan came out, importantly, there was like the DCEU was kind of underway, and we had, I think it was around the time of Batman versus Superman, or maybe the Justice League had came out for the first time. But I was in college, and this movie comes out, and there had already been several X-Men movies. He had already played the character like 9 times, or however many it had been. I thought, alright, there's a lot of reasons for people to not really give a crap anymore about this X-Men movie universe, because we now had the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which was well underway. We had several Avengers films, Captain America Civil War. It was in full force. The MCU was dominant. No one gave a crap about the DCEU. It sucked. It was horrible, right? And even the X-Men universe, people didn't seem to really be too concerned about them coming out with more after we kind of just didn't get that Gambit movie that we were promised. We just assumed that this movie universe was going to fizzle out and die. But then they come out with this movie Logan. And this movie is entirely about Wolverine getting old and coming to terms with himself eventually going to die of old age. And not only that, but losing everyone that he's ever loved. In the movie, he only has Charles Xavier left. This character has lost, he has outlived everyone he's ever known and cared about. And so many times this character isolates himself from society. So many times he doesn't agree with what the X-Men are doing, so he just leaves the group. If he deep down thinks that what the X-Men are doing is not the right thing, he'll just leave the group. He'll say, alright, I'm out, and go do his own thing, or even fight against the X-Men. This character is genuinely the most heroic superhero out there, because just like Batman doesn't need to do what he's doing because Batman is super rich and has every reason to just be a total prick, some pretentious douche who doesn't care about anybody and chooses to fight crime, chooses to do the right thing. You have that exact same dynamic with Wolverine, because Wolverine doesn't need anybody. He's got a healing factor and can like hunt his own food and can work relentlessly. He does not need money, and he's happy in isolation having nothing, because at no point does Wolverine say, hey, I can utilize the powers that I have to become filthy rich. He never does that because he just doesn't desire that. He always comes back to choosing to do the right thing, to help people and to love people and to put himself out there. So in this movie, Logan, he's outaged everyone. Everyone he loves has died. And it's about, does he come to terms with the fact that he's going to die? Does he allow that to change him? Does he choose to be a hero to the day that he dies? To have the audience have such a positive response to this movie, to have it not only be a hit, but they literally re-released it. Like, while it was in theaters, they're like, wow, people are loving this. Let's just have a black and white version that you can watch in theaters. Hey, people, you'll want to watch it in black and white? My local movie theater, we don't even get, like, small movies, like the movie Begonia. We didn't get that movie in the theaters here. We didn't get Dragon Ball Z, Battle of the Gods. We don't get those, like, select theater movies. But in my theater here, we had Logan in black and white. And that's because this meant stuff to people. I remember being in a college class and my classmates talking about how amazing this movie was. And if you watch the movie, you understand that this is an incredibly emotional movie that's entirely about Wolverine coming to terms with himself, getting old and dying, and still choosing to do the right thing, still choosing to help people and to love someone. And that is such a, like, strong message. And as someone who's always loved this character since I was a child, to see how much this character means to other people who I like never expected this character would mean so much to them as well. It touched my heart in a way, because you can't deny that Logan is an incredibly emotional movie. And this story of the X-Men is all about them being discriminated against, them being hated, the world seeking to subjugate and eradicate them, and them fighting against that. The X-Men are a group of outsiders, and within that group, Wolverine himself is an outsider. We are introduced to the group of the X-Men through Wolverine, and he is willing to challenge the group, to leave the group, to lead when necessary, and to follow when necessary. This character, although being headstrong, will also change his mind, right? Because part of leaving the X-Men and rejoining is him reflecting on whether or not the greater good matters, whether or not the X-Men are worth what they are doing or what they're not, whether or not him being a part of that group serves a greater good or does not serve a greater good. And there's just like such an emotional core, right? Like the characters that are more iconic superhero characters, which clearly is only Spider-Man and Batman because they are more popular, really often the emotional core of those characters come down to their relationships. Right? Now with Batman, it's often his like friendship with Alfred or Robin or whoever, but definitely with Spider-Man. Like, think of the Raimi Spider-Man films. What is at the emotional core of those movies? It's almost entirely his romantic relationship with Mary Jane. The Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies. It's him and it's freaking Gwen Stacy. That's deeply at the emotional core of that movie. There's just so much more complexity and importance, I would say, to this character who happens to be Canadian and I think is the most dynamic and heroic superhero in history, and he is unquestionably one of the most iconic superheroes and Canadian characters. He's a clear number one to me.